July 2, 1944. An underground hospital cave located near Cherbourg, France. Dr. Schwester's white medical coat draped loosely over her shoulders as she stepped out from the underground gloom, hands elevated in surrender, squinting awkwardly at the blinding daylight she had not seen for several days. The Americans cannot truly possess the medical resources they assert. This must be psychological warfare meant to damage our morale. She had uttered these words to her fellow nurses just a few hours before in the deeply dug cave hospital beneath the fortifications by Cherbourg, but they would soon turn out to be only the first of many beliefs to be disproven. Behind her, 8 additional German army nurses proceeded into the light, among the earliest German nurses to be taken prisoner by American troops during the French invasion. In their final hours of the siege, they cared for injured Wehrmacht soldiers under candlelight, conserving the last doses of morphine and repeatedly sterilizing bandages for reuse. None among them realized that in just a matter of hours, they would observe medical abilities that overturned all they had been told about American weaknesses and German preeminence. The 9 nurses, apprehended after tending to wounded in circumstances that resembled ancient rather than modern surgery, were on the verge of encountering a medical operation so sophisticated and so well stocked that it would upend not only their ideas about medicine, but their entire ideological worldview. Colonel Richard P. Johnson, the commanding officer of the 45th Evacuation Hospital at Lamb, regarded them not with animosity but with genuine interest, as adversary medics yet fellow practitioners. In a few days' time, these nurses would be sent back to German territory under the rules of the Geneva Convention. Altogether, 16 German nurses would be traded on July 2 and July 9. However, before their return, they would bear witness to American medical practice in 1944. Drugs they had only heard of through rumors, surgeries performed with techniques beyond their education. The mental effect of these revelations would endure far beyond the duration of their short captivity. The beginning of the collapse can be traced to May 13, 1943, over a year earlier, amidst the intense heat of Tunisia. The capitulation of General Hans-Jürgen Phonem involved not only frontline soldiers but also thousands of medical staff, including doctors, orderlies, and among them, members of the DRK-Schwestern, the German Red Cross nurses who had served in Rommel's Afrika Korps throughout 2 years of fighting in the desert. Within those taken prisoner was DRK-Schwester Ilse Schulz, who had been awarded the Iron Cross Second Class in April 1943, being one of fewer than 20 women granted this medal during the conflict. Her counterpart, Schwester Grete Fock, who was also honored with the Iron Cross in April 1943, maintained detailed notes that would later be found within German military archives. The statement was made, "The Americans throw away more medical supplies in a single day than what we received over an entire month. They possess medicines of which we've only heard the names." The magnitude of the capitulation was overwhelming. Between 250,000 and 275,000 Axis servicemen, incorporating medical personnel from prestigious units such as the 21st Panzer, 15th Panzer Division, and the 90th Light Division, were included. Although the majority of the captured medical workforce comprised male doctors and orderlies, the nurses among them would undergo a particularly intense ideological disillusionment. The process implemented by the Americans for handling prisoners was governed by the Geneva Convention and was conducted with exceptional precision. At various collection points throughout Tunis, American medical staff organized the captured medical teams within just a few hours. Those necessary for caring for injured Germans remained behind. The remaining personnel were designated for removal from the area. Every nurse who was taken prisoner underwent a health inspection using instruments that had become rare within the Afrika Korps. By June of 1943, the earliest groups of captured German medical staff began boarding Liberty ships for the journey to the United States. These mass-produced ships themselves defied German claims about American deficiencies in industry. The onboard hospital facilities surpassed any that German nurses had encountered in their own country. Surgical rooms equipped with reliable electric lighting, working X-ray machines, and chilled storage for medications were all ordinary features. The most noteworthy aspect was the blood plasma units were correctly typed, properly stored, and could be administered securely, unlike the perilous direct transfusions that German forces often had to utilize at the front. Throughout the voyage, American medical generosity was evident daily. Sulfa powder, rationed 1 grain at a time in German medical practice, was employed freely. Bandages were discarded after just one use. German medical practitioners, accustomed to barely sufficient rations, looked on as American orderlies threw away leftovers. Such wastefulness would have seemed unimaginable in the Wehrmacht. The vessels with German medical captives docked at American ports, ranging from Norfolk to New York. Their initial views of America contradicted the persistent propaganda about a nation supposedly handicapped by economic depression. At the Norfolk Naval Base, the intake of medical staff involved full medical evaluations for all prisoners. Dental care was administered, infections were attended to, and those requiring glasses received them. This standard of treatment surpassed anything available to most civilians in Germany. The subsequent train trip into the interior revealed constant surprises. City after city offered views of brightly lit hospitals. In Richmond, the Medical College of Virginia's buildings could be seen from passing trains. In Philadelphia, the massive Pennsylvania hospital structure was visible. Every metropolitan area possessed a network of medical services superior to those in even the largest German cities. While stopped in Washington, D.C., volunteers from the American Red Cross came aboard to hand out supplies to German POWs. Items included toiletries, chocolate, cigarettes, and writing implements. German nurses, whose education emphasized doctrines of racial struggle, found it difficult to understand such acts of kindness shown to the enemy. Camp Opelika, Alabama, began operating in September 1942 and started to receive its initial Africa Corps medical staff in June 1943. The hospital within the camp evolved into an unprecedented setting where German physicians educated in Nazi racial doctrine collaborated with Americans engaged in standard clinical care. The presence of both German and American staff adhered to Geneva Convention stipulations. Oversight remained with American medical officers, while German staff took primary responsibility for treating patients. This arrangement formed a novel scenario. Enemy medical practitioners integrated into the American Army's medical structure. The scope of the facilities amazed the German nursing staff. Surgical suites featured apparatuses they had only read about in medical texts, such as electrical cautery tools, movable surgical lighting, and fast-acting autoclave sterilizers. The dispensary stocked hundreds of drugs, housed in temperature-regulated rooms, with expiration dates extending years into the future. On July 21, 1944, Glennan General Hospital in Opelika, Oklahoma, was redesignated as German Prisoner of War General Hospital No. 1, equipped with 1,690 beds and manned by both American and German medical personnel working in parallel. Colonel Henry W. Misch introduced a practice unimaginable under the Nazi regime. Integrated medical groups exchanged expertise across the lines of combat. German nurses from the NSA shaft who had been indoctrinated with the belief that American medicine was frail and corrupt encountered a practice anchored in strict scientific rigor. Most difficult for their belief system was the presence of African American nurses in the P wards, an outcome of the U.S. military's segregation policies that assigned black nurses to care for enemy prisoners, excluding them from treating wounded white Americans. German nurses documented these practitioners offering expert care that directly refuted every racial prejudice imparted by their training. The greatest evidence of American medical superiority came in the form of penicillin. In 1943, U.S. factories produced 21 billion units, and by 1945, production soared to 6.8 trillion units. German healthcare workers, unable to access such antibiotics, observed the everyday usage of this revolutionary medicine. At Camp Forest in Tennessee, which held German PSWs and featured comprehensive medical amenities, German nursing staff witnessed recoveries they had thought impossible. Infections considered fatal in German military hospitals were cured within a matter of days. Instances where German doctors would have been forced to amputate, Americans preserved their patients' limbs. Many of the American medical officers were civilians donned in uniforms, and they openly disseminated their expertise. Such transparency with adversaries flew in the face of what German medical professionals had been taught about both war and their vocation. The American management of blood plasma represented another remarkable advance beyond anything seen in Germany. Accurate blood typing, compatible matching, and reliable storage eliminated the often deadly reactions that resulted from the live transfusions still performed by Germans. At installations such as the 21st General Hospital in Ravenel, France, which began employing captured German staff in December 1944, the blood distribution system operated with a scale and efficiency resembling manufacturing. Plasma stocks stored for lengthy periods, transported across vast distances, and administered without knowledge of patient blood types. These were abilities German medicine still lacked. German nurses trained in the Schwestern shaft learned to view medicine as a mechanism for racial advancement. Their instruction included hereditary biology and racial theory, which taught that weak individuals should be discarded for the betterment of the population. In places like the 12th Field Hospital's P unit, accommodating 30,000 beds, they observed the complete inverse. American medical personnel treated German POWs with the same attention given to their own injured soldiers. Prisoners from the enemy side received identical shares of precious medications, advanced surgical interventions, and attentive nursing as Allied combatants. This essential distinction, medicine serving universal recovery instead of enforcing racial aims, began undermining their ideological beliefs. The psychological repercussions at Christmas 1943 were significant. American groups delivered 500,000 parcels to German PSWs. Each package was filled with rare wartime goods such as coffee, chocolate, cigarettes, and soap. Camp Alva, Oklahoma served as the assigned site for Afrika Korps personnel. Local congregations performed Christmas songs in German. Boy Scouts distributed cards they had crafted by hand. Families whose sons were fighting in Europe sent treats they had prepared at home. The holiday meal, turkey, ham, vegetables, desserts, surpassed anything German troops had experienced in recent years. German nurses recorded their bewilderment as adversaries offered Christian kindness while their own propaganda had encouraged animosity. By 1944, the Special Projects Division rolled out all-encompassing educational initiatives. German nurses participated in lectures at places like the University of Nebraska Medical School at Fort Robinson. The subjects transformed their perspectives: medical ethics and patient rights, application of the scientific method in clinical environments. The instructional approach itself, which advocated for asking questions, engaging in debate, and airing disagreements, was contrary to their previous hierarchical schooling. Gaining access to American medical publications brought further surprise. Numerous German medical breakthroughs had originated with Jewish scientists expelled by the Nazis. The resulting mental conflict was immense. As American medical staff made their way to Europe, German nurses increasingly took on roles in military hospitals. At the 45th General Hospital in Bari, Italy, which received German prisoners on July 31, 1945, they served under direct American oversight. At Colonel Charles A. Pfeffer's Hospital, patients of all backgrounds were treated without bias. Allied military personnel, Italian noncombatants, and German PSWs alike. German nurses found themselves administering American procedures and medicines to individuals their ideology had labeled as lesser. American medical equipment appeared far more advanced. While X-ray apparatuses were rare in Germany, they were commonplace in the U.S. Electrocardiographs, which most German nurses had never seen, were part of standard American hospitals. At sites such as the 3rd Convalescent Hospital, operating from May until September 1945, German nurses gained practical experience with devices they had only heard about. Autoclaves sanitized equipment in minutes instead of hours. Electric suction devices replaced manual ones. Even simple changes like movable beds illustrated progress. The spring of 1945 brought the most shattering of realizations. Footage from liberated concentration camps was screened for German PW medical staff who had served under Nazi rule, forcing a reckoning with their ethics. Initial disbelief collapsed as the evidence became irrefutable. Accounts from American officers who entered the camps, photographs, and correspondence from Germany verified the reality. They recognized their participation in a regime that distorted medicine into an instrument of death. The Americans responded to this with professionalism, stressing that while medicine itself was not to blame, it must no longer be subordinated to ideology. American officials enacted focused denazification efforts for healthcare workers. Compulsory courses addressed medical ethics and the ideals of democracy, employing case studies to illustrate the harm caused by racial medicine versus the benefits of science-based care. Lieutenant Colonel Dorothy Whitman at Camp Opelika arranged for German nurses to observe American nursing, focusing on thorough record-keeping and advocacy for patients. The point was clear. Technical competence alone, without moral practice, was inadequate. Throughout their imprisonment, German nurses were consistently astonished by the abundance in American medical care. Hospitals threw away medications that had only just expired, while such supplies were unproducible in Germany. Tools were exchanged at the first signs of wear instead of being fixed numerous times. This level of wastefulness suggested a truth opposite to Nazi narratives. America generated boundless medical resources without needing to occupy other countries. Germany waged war for materials America manufactured in abundance. American nursing directly challenged German nurses' sense of professionalism at its core. The Nazi system required unquestioned obedience. Meanwhile, American nurses operated as autonomous experts with real independence. They had the authority to question medical directives, propose different approaches, and make their own judgments within their training. This mode, which was unfamiliar in Germany, meant their responsibilities were entirely redefined. Captain Helen Morrison at Glennan told them, "You're accountable for your patient's results. If you see something wrong, you must speak up, regardless of rank." This message fundamentally changed their view of nursing. The presence of African American medical staff caused intense internal conflict. German nurses worked under black professionals who displayed greater medical expertise. Lieutenant Elena Powell at Camp Florence, Arizona, managed German nursing teams with a level of professionalism that undermined racist propaganda. When she corrected their methods or instructed them, the German nurses were forced to acknowledge the falsehoods in their racial education. The contradiction was evident. In the United States, black nurses were assigned to look after enemy captives. Still, this imperfect system delivered superior results compared to Nazi racial healthcare. After Italy surrendered in September 1943, Italian healthcare workers who cooperated with Americans received special treatment. German nurses watched as their former allies were granted privileges, while they remained under stricter controls. This pragmatic system in which current collaboration was valued over past loyalty stood in sharp contrast to inflexible Nazi policies. Italian nurses could operate freely, while German nurses who clung to Nazi beliefs were watched closely. Even as detainees, German nurses obtained medical instruction far surpassing their prior training. American supervisors imparted new procedures, drug therapies, and equipment know-how without restriction. Lessons included burn management from the Pacific Front, advanced surgical practices from European theaters, all shared with enemy personnel. German nurses kept detailed records, aware that upon returning to a devastated homeland they would need every possible skill. As the war concluded in May 1945, American authorities equipped German medical staff for their return by providing in-depth retraining. Lessons included public health, dealing with outbreaks, crisis medicine, and essential skills needed for reconstructing Germany's healthcare infrastructure. They were taught about purifying water, orchestrating widespread vaccinations, treating severe malnutrition. Colonel Richard Stevens addressed them, saying, "You're going back to enormous health needs. Consider this knowledge our contribution to democratic Germany." The training involved setting up clinics with minimum supplies, teaching support workers, enforcing community health standards. German nurses were given certificates attesting to their American-acquired skills credentials that held value in occupied Germany. Those who returned from 1945 to 1946 discovered that 60% of German hospitals were destroyed. They not only brought back advanced American techniques but an altogether new medical approach. Former prisoners established nursing academies that prioritized patient rights over political doctrine. They put American methods in place throughout rebuilt institutions. Blood storage systems were modeled on American protocols. Widespread antibiotic usage followed American standards. By November 1945, with few American medical workers left in Germany, these nurses trained under the American system became indispensable to maintaining public health. The impact lasted for years beyond the war. By 1950, many German nursing programs were being led by returned former POWs. They introduced teachings they had absorbed in America: nursing assessment, patient advocacy, lifelong learning. German pharmaceutical manufacturers adopted quality protocols they had observed while captive. Hospitals themselves were reorganized based on American templates experienced firsthand. The move from political to scientific medicine became embedded in the post-war period. The statistics illustrate the magnitude. There were 371,683 total German PSWs in the United States. More than 200 medical centers in the U.S. employed German personnel. Over 100,000 hours of documented medical training were delivered. Medical interventions numbered in the hundreds of thousands. At least 15 nursing academies were set up by those who had returned. Dozens of hospitals in the American-occupied zone were restructured to follow U.S. models. Each nurse with this training affected scores of colleagues. Every transformed hospital cared for thousands. The ripple impact increased manyfold. In 1995, living German nurses who had been held by the Americans published a declaration. "We served the Nazi government and became American POWs. We testify that medicine, when it is perverted by politics, becomes an instrument of death, but medicine founded on scientific understanding and mercy is a source of life. Americans provided us with a surplus of goods we previously found unimaginable: medicines, devices, resources. Even more importantly, they showed us compassion-based medicine free from hatred. They treated their adversaries as patients entitled to equal treatment. We returned home with more than clinical expertise. We brought back the understanding that the act of healing transcends nationality and politics for the next generation of healthcare workers. Never permit medicine to be used to promote ideology instead of health." This was the greatest lesson American doctors and nurses imparted by treating their foes as human beings worthy of care. We arrived as captives. We departed as witnesses to the real aim of medicine. The transformation of German nurses in American POW camps became one of World War II's foremost ideological conversions. They learned about more than just technological advancement. Instead, they witnessed medicine's core goal: unbiased healing. Their shift from servants of Nazi doctrine to champions of scientific medicine illustrates how real-world experience can conquer propaganda. Exposure to American practice day after day achieved what compulsion could not: a total transformation of ideology. The 9 nurses who exited the subterranean hospital at Cherbourg on July 2, 1944, symbolized thousands destined for the same insight. They entered imprisonment convinced of German primacy. They left with the knowledge that true medical excellence arises from scientific practice, resources, and compassion for every person. This was the United States' ultimate medical triumph, proved day by day. Medicine dedicated to human dignity prevails over medicine warped by ideology. German nurses were not merely detained, they were converted through witnessing medicine's actual purpose. This personal change paved the way for Germany's post-war medical rebirth, grounded in humanitarian values instead of racial ones. Their transformation serves as evidence that even deeply indoctrinated individuals can change when faced with absolute proof of a better system. German nurses who fell into American hands discovered not only superior material wealth, but a better philosophy of care. They had been instructed that medicine's role was to serve racial politics. They discovered instead that its true purpose is to serve humanity. That insight, learned during captivity in America, would reshape German medicine for decades. Their narrative serves as evidence. Medicine, when built on science and mercy, will always overcome medicine tainted by hate and dogma. The captured became testimonies. The adversaries became peers. Through their transformation, medicine was restored to its vital mission. Healing with no barriers, science unburdened by prejudice, compassion extended to all who are in pain.